Azerbaijan's Formula One qualifying session was 1 hour, 58 minutes long, longer than even last year's Baku Grand Prix. There was a record for F1, 6 red flags. The World Championship leader, Oscar Piastri, was in the wall, and I was told by someone quite close to him, it's the first time in his motor racing career where potentially he's taken a corner off his car. We ended up McLaren's worst qualifying position of the season. A Williams on the front row, and also close to pole position, actually on merit, as we'll dig into some details later. Liam Lawson, a driver whose future in Formula One's not guaranteed, has ended up third on the grid. It's one of the most chaotic qualifying sessions I've known. I'm here with Josh Suttill. Josh, what happened? Where did the craziness come from?
Well, one of the things we noticed, I think, as soon as we woke up and everybody here woke up, is just how windy it is here in Baku. It's properly gusty, and I'm not sure that always comes across on the TV. It's one of the things you always hear drivers and teams talk about. They complain about over the radio. I think Lance Stroll called it brutal, and it really is brutal. Like it's almost hard to walk outside. It's that windy. So this big 180-degree change in the conditions from Friday to Saturday has created plenty of chaos. I think it's given us this really, really exciting qualifying session in which the wind was hitting the drivers from every single direction. You know, there was headwinds, tailwinds, side winds, and that was changing corner by corner, lap after lap. And like you said, it was nearly a 2-hour session, so that's quite a lot of change, even within that 2-hour window. And I think that's why we got such an unpredictable grid.
Yeah, I can't recall a dry session where the cars look so difficult to drive. And this is a track, there's no room for error. There are very few asphalt runoff areas. Get it wrong, you're in the wall, and I think that's what happened today. So very briefly, the 6 red flags. Alex Albon in the wall at turn 1. Nico Hülkenberg off at turn 4. Franco Colapinto off at turn 4, just seconds after Pierre Gasly, his teammate, had gone down the escape road. Ollie Behrman, turn 2, brushed the wall, stopped. Charles Leclerc, big crash at turn 15. And Oscar Piastri, as we mentioned briefly earlier on, and we'll discuss a bit more later, off at turn 3 as well. So complete chaos. Now, this was a weekend where McLaren are hopefully battling for the Constructors' Championship, but it wasn't expected to be a strong weekend for them. Their car is brilliant in medium-speed corners. There aren't many of those here. It's not very good in straight-line braking. There's a lot of that here. So they always expect it to be a little bit on the back foot. But we've seen flashes of speed from the car. Both drivers have been in the wall all weekend, and it didn't click at all today either. So just run through what went wrong for McLaren today, and why have they ended up 9th and 7th on the grid?
Yeah, well, for Piastri, it seemed to just be that gust of wind I mentioned earlier really just threw him off on one of the crucial laps in Q3. And he pretty much just held his hands up after the race, said it was his error, and that, you know, you can't blame the wind because it's the same for every driver. And he was just unfortunate, I guess, to get that gust of wind and to make such a big error, which, like you said, is so rare for Piastri. On the Norris side, he was just really unlucky, probably one of the most unlucky drivers in qualifying. That might sound like an excuse, but when you really look into the detail of his qualifying session, there were so many things that went wrong that weren't his fault. He had a lap ruined by George Russell, didn't he? There were other laps ruined just at the wrong time. And then it basically left him needing this really good final lap, which just didn't come together. I think we were looking at the best sector times, and they were far, far earlier in the session for Norris, not when it really mattered at the end. So, yeah, and unfortunately, under-deliver for him. I think he clipped the wall at the turn 15 left-hander as well. And again, yeah, he was very kind of held his hands up straight away as an error on his part. Unfortunately for him, obviously, he's missed a big chance while his title rival has had a rare mistake. Unfortunately, Norris has made a couple as well. And pending any pit lane changes, anyone having to start from the pit lane, there are only 2 places apart on the grid, which is wild considering this is such a rare time where Piastri is under-delivered.
Talk about big chances going missed. I think Ferrari is probably the team that is most disappointed tonight in terms of their potential. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc had looked really quick in practice, both of them really buoyant. They'd gone into qualifying looking to go for pole position, and it all went wrong. It all went wrong in a big way. Josh, you spoke to both of them afterwards. Run through what happened and what was their reaction?
Yeah, it was weird because they wanted each other's tyres, basically. so to explain that, basically, Lewis Hamilton, who had looked really good in practice, he was actually the Ferrari driver who was looking quickest. Even though Charles Leclerc, we know, loves this place. He's been on pole position, the last 4 years before here. It's actually Hamilton who was quicker. But it didn't play out that way. And it didn't play out that way in Q2, where basically Lewis Hamilton was basically given the soft tyres when he wanted the medium tyres, and Leclerc was on the medium tyres because in FP2, Leclerc had saved the set when Hamilton had used the set. So again, these decisions that were made on Friday then had a big impact come Q2. Hamilton wasn't able to be put onto those mediums. Ferrari also explained that there had to be a bigger warm-up, something that Pirelli mentioned as well, wasn't it? That these mediums needed to be fired up longer. So when Hamilton wanted to change onto them midway through the session, Ferrari said, no, there needs to be a longer period of warm-up. So for Hamilton, it was very much a case of execution costing him and making sure he was going out in 12th place, out in Q2, rather than his own driving. This wasn't, in his view at least, one of these cases where he's just struggling with the car, something went wrong and he kind of made a mistake. For him, it was this kind of weird situation where he felt like he was on the wrong tyres. And then, so he basically came through the pen and said that. And then Charles Leclerc, having crashed out in Q3, having had those medium tyres that Hamilton so desperately wanted, said actually, no, they weren't the right tyres. And actually, he wanted to be on the opposite one. Leclerc had the same optimism that Hamilton had, and it was the same reason why Hamilton so desperately wanted those tyres. So again, one of those completely unpredictable variables, one of those things that has changed completely from Friday, but has made a big difference for Ferrari. But yeah, both drivers out, and both drivers feeling like, both drivers way out of position on the grid, and both drivers feeling like there's a lot more potential in this car, which just hasn't been delivered on today.
So McLaren out the picture, Ferrari out the picture in the fight for pole position. It should have been then potentially been an opportunity for Mercedes, but George Russell has been a bit under the weather this weekend. And obviously Kimi Antonelli's first time here in Formula One didn't quite click. But it's two surprising teams actually ended up in that fight for pole position against the man who eventually got there. It was Racing Bulls and Williams. Now Racing Bulls we know have been pretty quick, but I think the story of the day, the most kind of surprise of the day was Carlos Sainz. Absolutely nailed it in Q3. We've talked a lot in recent weeks about Williams' tyre prep problems. It's been kind of hanging over them recently. They did a lot of experiments at Monza to try to sort it out. They did more experiments here on the Friday to sort it out. They've spent the last 10 days at the factory running through scenarios, running through what goes wrong, how to get themselves sorted, what they need to do. And it paid off today. Today was all about being on the right tyre at the right time and the right track position. For them, that was being at the front of the queue. It was being on the optimum tyre, and their preference was new medium, old medium, soft. And they executed it. And actually, although we'll come to Max Verstappen in a second, who took pole position, Carlos Sainz had nailed the first runs in Q3 because he was one of the three drivers who got a time before the red flag for Charles Leclerc came out. Then on the second runs, it was actually Sainz went out and was flying. His first sector was well up there. The 35.337 compared to Max Verstappen's 35.331. So that was a brilliant first sector from Carlos Sainz. His final sector as well, 25.017 versus Max 25.209. So the question is, why was he on pole position? His middle sector didn't hook it up. He got wide on the exit of turn 6 on the damp, had a sideways moment, and he lost. It was 0.516 seconds up coming out of turn 6, and he came, by the time he got to turn 7, having lost all that momentum, it was 0.252 down on his best, and that was his lap ruined. That then left the door open for Max Verstappen, who had timed it beautifully in terms of when he was out on the track and nailing those tyres into the right window. How sensational was that lap from Max?
Yeah, this was a classic Max Verstappen pole position, wasn't it? Against all the odds when so many other drivers are making mistakes. He's just so good, isn't he? He's so good at judging when the grip is on an absolute knife edge. He just knows exactly what to do, because obviously the drivers are heading into these really tough braking zones where you can see what's happened to Piastri, you can see what's happened to Leclerc, and Verstappen is just so good at that risk versus reward judgment and just absolutely blew everyone else away today. Like you said, the gap was actually maybe a little bit smaller than the final classification makes it look. It looks like he's got a huge advantage. So Sainz was able to get a little bit close, but then obviously lost, like you said, about a second on himself in the middle sector, whereas Max just nailed it each and every sector. So yeah, what can you say? I mean, just another Max Verstappen special.
It's all gearing up for absolutely fascinating Grand Prix tomorrow. McLaren have got to go out there. They want to try to win the Constructors' Championship tomorrow. It may or may not happen. We've got some unpredictability at the front. Max Verstappen, obviously now, in a great position to grab a back-to-back win after the success at Monza. But the weather forecast for tomorrow is the same as it was today. There's wind expected. There's potential showers on the horizon. I think it's going to be a day of chaos. And I think from McLaren's perspective, based on how hard today's been, I don't think they're taking anything for granted heading into tomorrow.